The parks and open spaces of every Chinese city fill with people searching for spiritual and physical harmony. They come for their morning exercise, and they come to practice the ancient discipline of Tai Chi Chuan, as they have for close to 1,000 years. Some go through the elaborate series of movements alone, but more often they join in the huge spontaneous choreography of early morning China. In the background, the city wakes up. One out of every 4 human beings is Chinese. In 1982, the People's Republic of China held its first modern census. To count 1/4 of the human race was a task so formidable and its results so important to the world's knowledge of itself that the United Nations sent a film crew to report on the census and on the land and people of the world's most populous country. In the slow-motion ballet of the early morning, Chinese speak the gestures of their long past. In the forms and computers of their census, they will lay the plans for their future.
First of all, why bother to do a census at all, when things seem to run quite smoothly on their own? A census is the single most important instrument of social and economic planning in a modern state. The question most often asked, what was the total, is perhaps the least important piece of data to come out. All calculations of rates, birth rate, death rate, rate of increase, land-people ratio, even the incidence of tuberculosis or malaria or cancer require accurate census data as a base. The proportion of young people in a population will determine the rate of increase for a generation to come, and that in turn will determine the need for schools, housing, teachers, jobs, even leather for basketballs or canvas for sneakers. The proportion of people in cities will determine the demands on the countryside for food, lumber, water, power, and so on. The proportion of people reaching old age will determine the amount of national income that a country must somehow put aside for pensions and various forms of social welfare, and this in turn will have an effect on wages and current consumption, on medical services, and even city planning.
The United Nations Fund for Population Activities provided computers, and United Nations statistical and census experts helped with training and planning. But computers are only as good as the data that goes in, and that has to be collected with precision by hand. The huge task of organization and planning was done by the Chinese, adapting modern technology to their own unique society and culture. There is no easy way to conduct a census. Nobody enjoys bearing their vital statistics to bureaucracy, and people don't hold still to be counted. On any given day, a large percentage of the population is somewhere else, on business, in hospital, in the army, away from home. The Roman Empire solved this by ordering everyone to return to their birthplace for Census Day, which is why a young couple called Joseph and Mary, who lived in Nazareth, happened to be in a stable in Bethlehem when the baby Jesus was born. But this solution would not be practical in a modern state. Counting in China presents some problems few other countries have had to deal with, either in scale or nature. The geography of China is a barrier more formidable than the Great Wall. 1/3 of the land is mountains, stretching from these, north of Beijing to the Kunlun and the Himalayas, the world's highest. Hundreds of thousands are literally a floating population, on boats and rafts, on rivers, lakes, or the sea. 4 regions, Inner Mongolia, Tibet, Qinghai, and Xinjiang, contain half the land area of China, but sustain less than 4% of the population. In these regions, the climate is generally harsh, the land arid, and the distances immense. Over 90% of the population lives on 40% of the land. Sichuan province alone has nearly 100 million people. Only 6 countries in the world have more. In the rice-growing areas around Chengdu, densities of over 2,000 people per square kilometer are common. To count, tabulate, and cross-check in such numbers is an administrative nightmare.
China has been counting its population, off and on, for at least 2,000 years. 2 centuries BC, the Chinese reportedly numbered some 50 to 60 million. The Emperor Qin Shi, who buried these spectral warriors at Xi'an and who also built much of the Great Wall, had a standing army numbering in the millions. 16 centuries later, when the Ming emperors took up residence in the Forbidden City, the population was again some 50 to 60 million. In between, there had been increases during stable periods and drastic declines during times of catastrophe. Flood, famine, civil war, plague and pestilence were frequent visitors to ancient China. It took close to 3 centuries for the population to double, but in the last 150 years of the Qing dynasty, it doubled again and redoubled. When the Qing dynasty fell in 1911, there was no acceptable official population figure, and no full census was taken during the first half of the 20th century. China was engulfed in war almost continuously from the mid-30s until the victory of the revolution in 1949. The League of Nations, which, like the United Nations, was the authoritative source of world statistics, used the arbitrary total of 450 million for several decades. 3 years after its founding, the People's Republic of China held a census, and another in 1964. The 1953 census had only 6 questions. The next one had only 9. They were processed by hand, and the results not made public for some time. In those 11 years, however, the population grew by more than 120 million. The turmoil of the Cultural Revolution interrupted almost all serious statistical record-keeping, as it did most other Chinese institutions. After 1976, the Chinese leaders decided that development must take precedence over ideology. The policy of the 4 modernizations was launched. The first thing to do was to take stock. How many are we? How many of us are educated? Where do we live? And how are we employed? How fast are we growing?
Before any census, the people must know what the whole exercise is about and why it is important. For months, every street corner, every school, clinic, and public office had its census posters and banners. Every factory notice board carried its instructional message. In the week before the census, open squares and public places everywhere were filled with marching bands and groups of children from local schools. Street performers incorporated census material into their traditional routines. Even magicians lent a little sleight of hand. There's no mystification about the banner that emerges. Population census, everyone's responsibility, it says in Mongolian. The same message appears in Chinese. But the real work of preparing for the census takes place in the basic units of Chinese society. The neighborhood committees in the towns, the production brigades in the rural communes. China functions as a vast organism made up of separate cells, each cell responsible in large measure for the welfare of its residents. In each unit, 30 or 40 families perhaps, young cadres throughout the country will explain, one by one, the significance of each of the 19 questions on the questionnaire. The census information is not confidential, but still it is necessary to reassure people that it is to their benefit to answer accurately.
A census is a frozen moment in a country's history. It is like a photograph of a population profile taken at a particular moment. The moment chosen for 0 hour was midnight, June 30th, 1982. A baby born 5 minutes before midnight would be counted. One 5 minutes after would have to wait for the next census.
This baby was born on July 1st, so that he won't be counted into this census.
Early in the morning of July 1st, more than 5 million men and women set to work simultaneously across the country. Some 6 million census personnel have been trained. Enumerators, supervisors, coders, computer programmers. Nearly 7 million more have helped as volunteers. This is an apartment block in Beijing, Temple of the Moon, North Street. Most of the people registered here are urban workers, some retired. All Chinese have a household registration book which entitles them to get their food rations and live in a particular neighborhood, apartment, or commune. During the 10 days of the counting, all heads of household must report to their designated station. In China, a head of household may be a woman or a man. The family decides who it is that really makes the decisions. One problem for census takers is that the world's most populous country also has the fewest names to go around. Whole villages may share the same family name. Half the population of Beijing seems to be called Liu, Li, Wang, or Zhang.
您在哪儿工作？
我在居委会卫生站。
做什么工作？
餐厅。
餐厅服务员。
The Evergreen People's Commune on the outskirts of Beijing, a successful fruit and vegetable commune, supplying the city's daily food. 13,466 households live here, nearly 50,000 people, divided into 8 production brigades. The enumeration station in this brigade was set up in a storage shed in a peach and plum orchard. 162 enumerators and 20 supervisors will count this commune alone. Some census stations were mobile. These raftsmen are constantly in motion, floating logs down the fast-flowing Min River to the factories where they will be processed into building materials and paper. The census boat catches them as they work. In the Baogua Temple, high in the Yumei Mountains, 26 monks live in a collective household. 2 enumerators track up the mountain to reach them.
The Mongols are one of China's 55 national minorities. About 94% of the country's population is ethnic Chinese or Han. The national minorities, Manchu, Miao, Hui and Tibetan, Uyghur, Yi, Zhuang and Yao, are only 6%. But 6% in China is some 56 million people. Over a quarter of the 2.5 million Mongolians are still nomadic, living much as their ancestors did when they swept across the world in the 13th century. Men and women grow up in the saddle. The herds of horses run free on the Great Plains until the epic battle of wills when a fresh horse is chosen to capture and subdue. Census takers had to ride 10, 20 days to find some of the more remote grassland families. The traditional Mongolian yurt is made of felt, stretched over a lattice of willow poles. It can be dismantled in a few hours when the family moves on to other grazing lands. The census in the grasslands was taken with full Mongolian hospitality, legendary as in the days of Genghis Khan.
The future of China depends on the success of the members of the people's communes in feeding themselves and providing for the cities. Chujiao is a relatively wealthy commune, not far from Chengdu in Sichuan province, the most heavily populated and intensively farmed province in China. The commune produces rice throughout the summer and spring and winter crops of wheat and rapeseed. Last year, they produced enough to feed their own people, as well as 300,000 kilos to sell to the state. The whole commune numbers nearly 30,000 people. This is number 9 production brigade, which has 3,052 members, of whom 1,500 are workers and the rest children or retired. About 80% of the people of China live on the land. In Chinese terms, peasants. There are more Chinese peasants than the total populations of the Soviet Union, the United States, Japan, West Germany, France, and the United Kingdom combined. And so the texture and quality of life down here on the farm is of enormous importance to the balance of the world's resources. Small changes in the lives of so many require an enormous increase in productivity. If all Chinese peasants were to add 2 eggs a day to their diet, it would mean doubling the world's production of eggs.
Sun Wencheng and his wife Li Faiying lived in this area long before the land became communalized, and he continued to work off the commune with the railway hotel until he took early retirement at 50. The Suns are a 3-generation family. Grandparents, married sons and grandchildren live together in this family compound and cook and eat together. This is what's called a one-kitchen family. 2 daughters married and moved out to live with their husbands' families. That was the traditional pattern, and it helped to encourage large families and to favor sons. Sons would stay and help support parents. Daughters moved out. In the new China, daughters earn, too, in the communes and the cities, and the tradition is slowly changing. Most of the family's vegetables come from their private plot. This is a change since the new rural responsibility policies were introduced after 1976. The grandparents have seen many changes here over the years. Before liberation, which is the word everyone uses for the victory of the revolution, they lived here in a straw hut. In the 50s, a period of national reconstruction, they built a house of mud bricks. In the 70s, they built this compound of bricks from the commune's brick factory. Electricity came in 1972. But the biggest change in their lifetime, they said, came after 1976. With the new policies, they were permitted not only private plots, but also sideline occupations were revived. Pigs, chickens, ducks, which they can raise and sell on the open market at Chengdu. Since 76, the family has been able to afford 3 bicycles, 3 sewing machines, and, last year, a television set. His family snapshots, his school, his graduation, his bicycle, these are proud moments for oldest son Sun Shi-long. He completed middle school here on the commune. That's where he met his wife, Chan Yuan-fen. They have a baby daughter. The other 8 adult members of the family have similar rooms around the central courtyard, each with a 4-poster bed, 2 chairs, and a table for tea. Both Sun Shi-long and his wife work, not in the fields, but at the brigade's headquarters, about 10 minutes' walk from the family compound. He is the brigade's accountant. The sounds at brigade headquarters are not the thrashing of farm machinery, but the clicking of his abacus and the hum of manufacturing. Chan Yuan Fern works in the fur factory. They make jackets and blankets for sale in China. Back in the 50s, China decided that it could not afford the unplanned migration to the cities that has happened in most of the developing world. It is extremely difficult to get permission to move from country to city. With little or no spare land, the problem of too many people on the land is an acute one. Su Jiao has solved this by building small industries right here. More than half of the brigade's workforce now work in manufacturing. They make flight bags, caps and hats, shoes, chairs, all kinds of things. Today, they even manufacture for export. Down jackets and goose-down quilts of high quality, made right here amid the rice paddies of rural Sichuan, go to Japan, Europe, and the United States. When grandmother Li Fa-ying was young, girls around here married at about 14, had 8 or 9 children, and 4 or 5 survived. After liberation, girls married at about 18 and had about 6 children. Again, 4 or 5 survived. Now girls don't marry until their 20s and have 1 or 2 children, and usually all survive.
On agricultural communes, enumeration stations were set up right in the fields, so as not to interrupt the routine of farming. Older Chinese often do not know the date of their birth by the year, only by the lunar calendar, the year of the dragon, or the tiger, or the year of the rabbit. All enumerators carry a chart to translate this into a year of birth. In their spare time, the whole family works on their private plot. What they grow here they can keep, in addition to what they earn in work points. Everyone who works on the commune, whether in agriculture or industry, gets work points. Twice a year, the brigade distributes grain to its members, according to the size of the family. Some of the work points go toward the food ration. At the end of the year, if there are any surplus work points, they are paid in cash. Production brigade headquarters take the place of the old pre-revolution Chinese villages, which is natural, since most production teams were, in fact, reorganized villages. It is here, at the tea shop, that brigade members gather to exchange news and predict the weather and play checkers, much as their ancestors used to do. The rhythms of country life change very slowly. Chujiao is an unusually prosperous commune on rich land and close to a large city market, Chengdu. Very few communes have these advantages.
Every inch of cultivable land is used intensely. Beans are planted on the edges of rice paddies. Mulberry trees often grow between the beans to feed silkworms. Patches of lotus grow in the irrigation canals or the corners of ponds. Every day, the countryside gathers and sends to the cities, by bicycle cart and frequently human back, many thousands of tons of grain and foodstuffs. Getting enough food is a daily preoccupation. Purchases are made with the care of a diamond dealer selecting stones. Sometime in the last century, China reached the limit of its easily cultivable land. In 1949, about 10% of the land area was growing food. It took 30 years of unremitting labour to bring this up by 1%, to 11%. Grain production has doubled in the last 30 years, but the population has also doubled. And for every acre painfully gained, one is lost, to cities, to erosion, to salinity. This is one of the purposes of the census, to enable China's planners to calculate the rate of agricultural growth necessary to feed a quarter of the human race.
Everyone needs food, but nearly everyone wants other things too, like a bicycle. Roads at rush hours become rivers of bicycles, gliding unhurriedly, tinkling bells, weaving in and out. Chinese factories produce millions of bicycles a year. They cost 150 yuan or more, about $80. An urban worker might be able to save, with care, 10 to 20 yuan a month. Everyone wants one. The most popular brands are the Flying Pigeon, the Unicorn, the Everlasting, and the Phoenix.
And a huge new generation is growing up that will want their own flying pigeon. Almost 2 out of 3 Chinese were born since the revolution. They are better fed, better educated, healthier than the generation before, and much more likely to survive to old age. Primary education is virtually universal in the towns for boys and girls. This is a Mongolian language class at a school in Hua Hot in Inner Mongolia. It has about 1,200 students from 7 to 17 or 18. The children learn language skills in standard Chinese, Mongolian, and a foreign language, usually English. They learn sciences, music and art, physical education and politics. They belong to the biggest age cohort in China, from 10 to 18 years. The biggest of all is those born in 1963. They are college freshman age, but only a few, about 3% of the age group, will be able to go to college. China's universities can hold only about 12 per 10,000 youngsters. By now, the percentage of girls has dropped to about a quarter. Beijing University is the most prestigious university in China. The graduating class in international relations poses for a class picture. For them, the future is secured. They have passed through every hurdle in the educational system to get here. Those who make it have an awesome responsibility for the future of their country. The Cultural Revolution closed down China's universities for several years, and a whole generation lost their chance for higher education. More than anything else, China needs skilled and trained people to carry out the 4 modernizations. When they graduate, the state will assign them to work where they are most needed.
I mean, the government will assign out jobs according to the need of the country, the development of the economy or something else.
Well, usually we talk with the
Huan Xiaodong and Che Fei are sophomores studying English.
kind of department would you like to go to, and we tell the teacher our wishes, and the teacher will and we will be assigned according to
The need of the
our
country.
own will and the need of the country.
What are you going to do when you graduate?
Oh, I would like to be a teacher. I'm very interested in teaching.
I like to be an artist because, by the way, my father was an artist, painter, and I like art very much. So maybe.
I would like to work in Beijing because both of my parents are here, and they need my care when they get old. And besides, I have get used to the life in Peking, and I'm so deeply in love with the streets here, with the city, with every rivers, with every mountains, every park. Oh, I love this place.
The climate or the circumstances is nothing to me.
What's important to you?
The job, yeah. I want a job that fits me, and the problem is the economy. We have to raise the living standard of all the people, and but at present time there are maybe several million young people have no job.
In the cities alone, about 4 million young people come into the job market every year. To create 4 million urban jobs a year is like building an entire economy the size of Norway annually. There are almost as many teenagers in China as there are people in the United States. This is the biggest population bulge, the 18 to 20-year-olds. And it means that even if China succeeds in bringing its birth rate down sharply, the population will inexorably continue to grow. What are their prospects? These are trainees at the shoe embroidery factory, Chengdu. They come here at about 17 or 18 years after senior middle school. They spend 4 months learning basic stitches and then do an exam. The successful ones will be taken on as full apprentices. Others will go back to their communes to work at embroidery there. The apprentices will work with master embroiderers for 2 years. They learn to create people, fish, flowers, and animals. Some of the spectacular robes for the opera are created here, but most of their products are for export. A detailed, elaborate figure like this one will take about 1.5 years to complete. Those who successfully pass their apprenticeship will probably spend the rest of their lives here. This carpet factory in Huahot in Inner Mongolia also produces for export. The wool comes from the grasslands, woven on hand looms, smoothed or clipped by machine. The majority of employees are women. Most live in the factory's dormitories and leave their children in the nursery and kindergarten by day. A 9x12 carpet takes 3 workers 3 months to complete.
Before 1949, China's industry was rudimentary. Traditional crafts like embroidery and carpet making were more like inherited skills passed down in families. China's industrial growth since the revolution has been phenomenal. Some 355,000 factories, large and small, constructed in 30 years, one of the highest growth rates anywhere. China is now the world's leading producer of cotton textiles, number 2 in radios, number 3 in coal, one of the top 10 in steel and oil. China manufactures computers, electron microscopes, jet planes. It has more car and truck plants than any other country. Beijing number 1 milling machine factory produces some 4,000 machines a year, sold in about 50 countries as well as China. The factory runs like an enormous extended family, a family of 7,400 members. Liu Junyong is a young mother. She and her husband have not yet got a household registration for their own home, and they live in the factory dormitory. Their baby is in the factory nursery. Twice a day, she gets half an hour off her machine to feed him. The factory also has a store, a clinic with 66 health workers and a surgery, and an Olympic-sized swimming pool. The nursery and daycare center has a working staff of 102, taking care of children from infancy to 6.5 years. Some of the children stay here 6 nights a week and go home on the 7th. The older children have lessons, language and arithmetic, drawing, physical exercise. They learn singing and dancing and are accomplished group performers by 6. Women factory workers can retire at 50, men at 55. The practice has developed that children can take their parents' place. Not necessarily the same job, but the registration at the factory. So most of these children will quite probably one day step into their mother's or father's shoes at Beijing No. 1 milling machine factory, where they learned to talk and write and sing about Tiananmen Square. The factory even has its own militia. Workers are trained in military preparedness, ready to defend their institutions if attacked.
Well, I'm Dr. K.C. Lee, a radiologist and head of the Department of Radiology in Peking Hospital. I have a son and a daughter-in-law and also a granddaughter. She is 10. She's with me. We live together. Here, really, if you work like a man, you get the same amount of salary. That's very important. And now most family, both of them work. And the children are taken care of by the kindergarten or the nursery. Yeah, they only take the children back on weekends.
Chinese constitution says women enjoy equal rights with men in all spheres of political, economic, cultural, social, and family life. Men and women enjoy equal pay for equal work. It was not always so. Before the revolution, women were surely the largest disinherited group in China. A proverb said, "A woman should be a virtuous wife and a good mother." Another said, "An ignorant woman is virtuous." Chinese women were largely illiterate, could not inherit property, and were taught subservience and obedience first to parents, then to husband. Female infanticide, though illegal, was sometimes practiced in the countryside. Young girls of means had their feet tightly bound from the age of about 5 to 15, condemning them to a painful and tottering old age. Foot binding persisted well into the 20th century. The revolution changed all that. Women earn pay in the factories and work points in the fields. 1/3 of all Chinese scientists and engineers are women, and a significant number of doctors.
I think I was more recognized, my talent, not because I'm a woman that they do not recognize me. See, I'm the head of the department. Yeah, in the former days, not many women get that position. And even where with divorce, see, the men are always right. They have the reason to divorce you. But at the present, it's not not the same. See, which part is right, which part is wrong. In the old time, in the old China, see, men have all the rights. They even say that almost every man have some sort of romance. It's just natural.
As part of the campaign to raise the status of women, the government discourages elaborate wedding celebrations and the payment of dowries. Here, at Wugui Production Brigade in Sichuan province, marriage is a simple affair. The commune secretary changes the young bride's registration book to the husband's household and writes their names in a marriage certificate. The certificate cites Article 53 of the Constitution, guaranteeing equal pay to men and women, and it goes on to quote, "Men and women shall marry of their own free will. The state protects marriage, the family, and the mother and child. The state advocates and encourages family planning." Lai Hun-ching is the barefoot doctor of Wugui Production Brigade. Actually, she's neither barefoot nor a doctor, having trained in basic preventive medical care for 6 months in 1974, with regular refreshers 1 day a month at the commune hospital. She gets work points for her job like everyone else. Commune members pay 1 yuan a year for medical care, about 70 cents, and a few cents for a visit, which includes medicine. She dispenses both Western and traditional medicines. Lai Hun-ching is assisted by a traditional practitioner who does acupuncture and massage of acupressure points. One of the clinic's most important functions is family planning. The young women of the brigade come here for birth control pills, sometimes injections or IUDs, as available and according to preference. Wugui village has had a family planning program since 1974. In 1979, the party called on the whole nation to have only 1 child per couple. Wugui has had a particularly good record of 1-child families. The women's director and the barefoot doctor run the family planning program. They keep a health record of all women of childbearing age in the brigade, helping them to plan their pregnancies at the best moment for the whole community. The double happiness sign on the door means that this couple have not been married long, only 6 months. She is pregnant. They have pledged to have only 1 child. The barefoot doctor and the women's director pay regular visits to the pregnant women, advising them what they should expect at each stage. The commune offers substantial incentives for promising to have only 1 child. A couple will get an initial lump sum in rice and money. The single child will get a full adult grain ration. The single child will get a private plot of 75 square meters. The normal allocation is 50. Each year, when the commune distributes meat and vegetables, the single child will get a double share. If the child dies, the couple may of course have another, but if they make a mistake after they have promised, they must pay back the rewards. The 1-child family policy will not last forever, and it will create problems of its own, but it is the best hope for stabilizing population growth before the end of the century. This generation knows it must make sacrifices for the sake of the country's future.
The old people have made their sacrifice. By law, children must support their parents. Most retired industrial workers receive a pension, usually 75% of their former salary. The proportion of old people in China's population has risen dramatically and will be rising still more by the end of the century. Now, every 100 employed persons supports about 14 old people. Even if the 1-child family policy succeeds completely, By the end of the century, the same 100 will be supporting 25. For those few who have no family, the commune or neighborhood provides old people's homes. Here at the Evergreen People's Commune, 61 aged or handicapped people live together as a collective household. They are supported by the commune and get pocket money besides for personal needs. The enumerators set up their station here.
您今年多大岁数了
93。
？93了。
In the 300 years of the Qing dynasty, ordinary people were not allowed to set foot in the Forbidden City on pain of death. The height of buildings in Beijing was controlled so that no one could overlook its formal gardens, palaces and temples. Now, thousands of ordinary people visit the Forbidden City each day. They wander through the Hall of Supreme Harmony and the Palace of Earthly Tranquility, eating popsicles and enjoying the sun. In the outer courtyards of the city, they pose for photographs, acting out their favorite fantasy from China's past. A conquering warrior, perhaps, a prince and princess. They also pose, perhaps wistfully, for a photograph of China's future at the wheel of a late model car.
The total count announced in October 1982 for the 29 mainland provinces of China, 1,008 million. But the full results take years to analyze. The first modern census for a quarter of the human race is part of the blueprint for China's future. But it will also fill an important blank in the world's self-knowledge. What happens in China is important for us all.